Oh my goodness. Okay, thank you everyone. I was wondering why I wasn't showing up as the active speaker. Uh, Thank you for the reminder that I was muted. Welcome, welcome. So probably didn't hear me say it the first time, but I have opened up the chat box at the corner, the bottom of my screen, and it's always nice to have active participation. So feel free to ask me any questions while I'm talking, and I'll also leave a little bit of time at the end to cover any questions that you might have then. So let's get started. Okay. So our agenda today is to talk about some of that. We're going to start by actually talking about some of the health benefits of chocolate and wine and warm bread, but we're also going to be spending the majority of our time talking about why these foods are so addictive, how some of these habits start dealing with cravings and managing stress eating. So starting first with chocolate. Probably many of us have heard that chocolate is good for you. And for those of us that love chocolate, this is always good news. And we're always so happy and excited to hear this, right? Why is chocolate good for us? Well, cocoa has a lot of benefits. Multiple studies show that it can help with cognitive performance, can make us a little bit more alert, acts as an antidepressant, is good for our cardiovascular system, or it can help lower blood cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, help lower blood pressure. And so those are all good things, right? Chocolate makes us happy. There's a class of compounds that are found in raw cocoa, and these are some of the same chemicals that our body produces when we fall in love. So that's why you always get chocolate on Valentine's Day, right? This PEAs is the class of compounds. It can also help increase serotonin levels. And we know that chocolate contains a lot of antioxidants. All good things. Red wine, you may have heard, has some health benefits, right? It has a lot of antioxidants. It's a lot of resveratrol. And wine in general, not even just red wine, has been shown to be, as part of the MIND diet, 1 glass per day has been shown to help prevent dementia. It's beneficial for heart health in small amounts. So all good things. However, the recommendation is always, if you don't drink already, don't start. Um, the risks there certainly outweigh any of the benefits. And even some whole grain bread has lots of health benefits as well, right? It's a good source of B vitamins, thiamine, folate, all those good B vitamins. It's good. It contains some vitamin E, lots of antioxidants, fiber. And for those of you who do enjoy bread, this is one of the breads that I really enjoy, this Iggy's bread. And it's a fermented sourdough. So if you buy a bread that doesn't contain yeast, but actually uses like a starter, it actually has some better benefits than any of the breads that use yeast. And this sourdough, the doughs that use starter are actually lower in gluten, so much so that sometimes people that are gluten sensitive, now of course not celiac, but gluten sensitive people do a lot better with sourdough bread. Also, because of the fermentation, this bread can also act as a prebiotic for our gut bacteria. So certainly lots of benefits from like a whole grain sourdough bread. But what does reality look like? We're not just eating, whole grain sourdough bread, and sometimes we're not stopping it at 1 glass of wine. And these foods can be addictive. Certainly there's many things that make them addictive. Let's start even first with just going back to the wine. Now, I had mentioned that wine, potentially 1 glass per day has been shown in studies to help decrease heart disease, decrease risk of dementia. But so here we see this is called the classic J-shaped curve. So your risk of dying goes up on the vertical axis, horizontal axis is the number of drinks. And we can see that if you don't have any drinks, your risk of dying is maybe a little bit more. But then, oh my goodness, as the number of drinks go up, the risk of dying and different various chronic diseases goes way up. So that's the J-shaped curve for wine. Now, what about some of the other foods? Why is it that we find chocolate so addictive and warm bread? Well, typically warm bread, let's start with that. We don't typically just eat a piece of bread. I don't know about you, but if I'm going to have a piece of nice warm bread, I'm going to put some butter on it, or maybe a little bit of honey. And we don't typically tend to just eat that. When we eat, and same goes for chocolate, right? We don't eat pure cacao nibs, most of us. I mean, maybe we enjoy them every once in a while. I actually enjoy them. But, let me tell you, milk chocolate, so much more addictive. Usually, if we just have cacao nibs or like 90% dark chocolate, we have maybe one piece, right? But what happens when you combine that chocolate with now sugar and fat? And sugar, fat, and even adding a little bit of salt makes these foods hyper palatable. And hyper palatable means that, if we just had something with sugar by itself, we might eat a little bit of it and we'd say, I'm done. If you think about nature, the foods that you find in nature, you might find some foods that are high in sugar. You might find some foods that are high in fat, like avocados, or in nature, you would find honey would be high in sugar. But nowhere in nature do you find foods that are high in salt, fat, and sugar all together. And what happens is that food manufacturers, when they combine these things in the form of processed foods, or think of French fries. French fries we don't necessarily think of as sugar, but as we chew the French fry, the enzymes in your mouth actually break down the starches into sugar. And the three of those things together, the reward centers in our brain just light up like, oh my goodness, this is a really, really good food. And so food manufacturers have kind of manipulated food to the point, to the what they call the bliss point. You don't want too much salt, you don't want too much sugar, but man, you get that salt and sugar just right, and it's hard to put down those foods. Uh, for several years now, you've probably heard people say, oh, sugar is more addictive than cocaine. And I have to admit, for a while, I thought, really, cocaine's pretty addictive. But I'm really seeing so many more studies, and certainly these studies are done in rodents, so you can't always, compare it to humans. And it's hard to, do a study where you give one group cocaine and one group sugar. But in studies with rodents, they've found that with free access to either sugar or cocaine, the rats will choose sugar over the cocaine, which is crazy, right? And we all probably maybe have some experience with that and how addictive sugar can be. So part of, this hyperpalatable foods and why we crave them so much is that they are very highly rewarding foods. So I want you all to maybe think to yourself, have you trained yourself to maybe associate some of these foods with a particular situation, with a particular part of your house, a part of the day? So because they are so rewarding, we can get into the habits of craving these foods very easily. I'll give you an example of this. So many years ago, when my children were small, they were probably 5 or 6. My husband gave me a big box of Godiva chocolates for Valentine's Day, and oh yeah, chocolate, and the kids are excited. And I said, no, this is Godiva chocolate. It's super expensive. I don't want you guys going to town on this. So you each going to have a piece, and I'm going to hide it. And my office is actually in the dining room where I am now. And so I thought, hey, I'll hide it from the kids and I'll put it in my office. And here you can see behind me, I have my buffet. And so I decided to put the chocolate in the buffet. And so Anytime I was kind of working at the table and I was a little stressed, a little bored, um, name an emotion, angry, happy, whatever it was. Oh, some chocolate would be good. And all I had to do was reach behind me and grab the chocolate. Now, I quickly realized that I'm going through this chocolate in no time and I need to do something here. So let me put this away and, you know, I'll put it down in my basement. So let me ask you all a question and feel free to put the answer in the chat box. Do any of you crave chocolate when you walk into your laundry room? I have always asked this question when I do webinars and I haven't had it. Thank you. I'm seeing some responses. No. No, I would imagine most of you don't. And I didn't either. However, in getting my chocolate out of my dining room, I decided to put it into my laundry room. And lots of laundry was getting done and life was wonderful. And I wasn't going to town on the chocolate, just having a piece every time I did laundry, and things were good. However, eventually the chocolate ran out, and then I realized that I had trained myself in a week and a half to crave chocolate when I walked into my laundry room. It took a week and a half to make that connection. Now, I'm seeing from all of you, none of you crave chocolate when you walk into your laundry room. And the reason why is you probably never put chocolate in your laundry room. But I would be, pretty sure that if you decided to now keep your chocolate in the laundry room, or your potato chips, or whatever food might be a food that maybe is a trigger food for you, that pretty soon, very quickly, you would make that association. Now, this was probably 7 or 8 years ago, and so it was a while ago. I no longer crave chocolate when I walk into my laundry room for the most part. But that connection is so strong that there are times, every once in a while, I walk into my laundry room and I say, oh, piece of chocolate would be good. And so here's how we form these habits. This is the 3 R's of habit formation. We get a reminder or some sort of clue or trigger or something. It could be a time of day, it could be a person, it could be a location, right? My laundry room. It could be an emotion. And then we have our routine. And when it comes to food, what's our routine? Is it having that piece of chocolate, opening up the freezer door and pulling out the carton of ice cream, walking into our pantry and kind of rifling around and seeing what it is? And then we get the reward. And these hyper palatable foods are much more rewarding, right? Let's face it. Carrot stick isn't all that rewarding, but the pleasure centers in our brain are really kind of attuned to these hyperpalatable foods, and they can be very, very rewarding. Now, we also secrete dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is also part of this habit loop formation. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter that not only makes us feel good, but it kind of drives us to do stuff. And so it drives us to go find that chocolate, find those chips. So is anyone stress eating? Oh no, maybe not anymore. Maybe we were at the beginning of the pandemic. Maybe we're feeling a little bit less stressed now. But any of you that maybe are working out of home with the entire family, maybe definitely yes, right? And we all do it at sometimes, right? Why do we do it? Why do we stress eat? Well, when we're stressed, we have what's called the fight or flight hormone, fight or flight response, right? And typically stressed, when we go back to as humans evolved, what kinds of things were we stressed about? It might be a tiger in, the corner of the cave or whatever. And so we had to, as humans, come up with a response to this. And we either fight the tiger or we run away. Either one, you're going to need energy to do that. Your muscles are going to need a lot of fat and sugar and very quick energy to respond to that stress situation. The body thinks we need energy and we need it now, right? Because we have to either run away or fight. And that's a really good response. And that works very well, right? flooding your, lots of sugar into your bloodstream, and you have lots of energy to do what you need. But the problem is that nowadays we're stressed all the time, right? We don't just need this quick energy, but what do we do? Our body still thinks, because we're secreting all these stress hormones like cortisol, our body thinks we need quick energy. And so we're for quick energy, what kinds of foods do you go to for quick energy? Typically, you don't go for things with a lot of fiber, things that need a lot of chewing, things that maybe don't have a lot of quick energy. What do? We go for these hyper palatable foods that are digested very quickly, that are chewed very quickly, that they don't have any fiber in them, so pretty much absorbed right away, and they give our body that quick energy. And so, you know, if we're doing this every once in a while, not a big deal. But what happens when we kind of have this low level of stress all the time? And all the time, it's not serving us anymore, right? Why else? Well, alcohol alcohol boosts endorphins. Endorphins are your body's opioids. So it's kind of like, for lack of a better word, it's kind of like your body's own cocaine system. It's these endorphins make us feel good. And so when we have alcohol, most of us release these endorphins. We feel a little bit happier. We're calmed down. Sugar and fat also boost these feel-good hormones. They're used to make sugar is used to make serotonin. Carbohydrates is used to make serotonin. Serotonin is the happy hormone. Most antidepressants work by increasing the level of serotonin in our body. But the problem is that over the long term, we feel worse. And there's a whole new branch of psychiatry. Well, I shouldn't say whole new, but a branch of psychiatry called nutritional psychiatry. And what this you know branch of study is realizing is that foods have a big impact on our brain. And all of those foods that maybe make us feel good in the short term, that are highly palatable and super processed, that over the long term, they do lead to anxiety and stress and depression. So it's kind of this vicious cycle, because we're eating the foods that make us feel good in the short term, but over the long term, so many studies are really showing that they actually make us feel much worse. So, how do we go about managing some of these cravings, managing overeating? What are some strategies? So, number one, first strategy would be to check in with yourself. So, pause and evaluate the situation. Why am I craving what I'm craving now? Why am I stress eating? Right? I liked this t shirt over here. Uh, I'm not hungry, but I'm bored. Therefore, I shall eat. Right? Are we bored? Are we a little anxious? Are we procrastinating? What are the reasons maybe that you're stress eating? Is it always just stress? Also check in. What have you trained yourself to do? Have you trained yourself to crave a certain food when you sit down on the sofa and turn on the TV? Have you trained yourself to maybe crave chips or whatever when you walk into your pantry? And we don't realize that we're training ourselves to doing those things. So really kind of checking in with yourself and kind of evaluating what's going on. I'd be curious to hear, has anyone trained themselves to make any of those associations? And to tell you the truth, I had never realized that I had trained myself to crave chocolate when I walked into my laundry room until it was gone. As I was doing it, I never really made that association and that connection. So one of the things with stress eating, that a good analogy that I like, that I was thinking about the other day, is it's a stock market analogy. Sometimes if you find yourself in the kitchen, in the pantry, whatever, stress eating and kind of this binge eating that you feel you can't get yourself out of, hitting the circuit breaker. And so in the stock market, I guess this goes back all the way to the 1987 stock market crash. The stock market crashed 20% in one day, and they realized they had to put some stop into place. And now, with the stock market, if it falls a certain amount in a day, I think it's 7%. So feel free to correct me if I don't have the wrong thing. What they do is they stop all trading, and you can't do anything for 15 minutes. And that allows everyone to kind of calm down, take a deep breath, not panic. And you can see here, I think this was from 2020. What happens is, that kind of free fall stops. And so when we think about this with eating, how can we kind of apply that to eating and stopping the free fall of maybe stress eating, right? What could you do to hit the circuit breaker? Sometimes it's just even telling yourself, okay, realizing that you're maybe binge eating, and saying to yourself, okay, I'm doing this. Let me put this down for 5 minutes. Let me put this down for a minute. Let me hit the circuit breaker for 30 seconds. Let me take a deep breath. Let me close my eyes. And maybe you continue, choose to continue eating again. Maybe at that point you say, you know what? This isn't really what I want to be doing now. Let me come back at some other point. And so this can be a really kind of helpful strategy. And just even thinking yourself, let me hit the circuit breaker for at least, even if it's just 5 seconds, close my eyes, take a deep breath, take a sip of water. Is this really what I want to be doing? So number two would make it harder to do. Anytime we see food, we're tempted to eat. And studies just show this over and over again. People that keep cereal out on their counter. There was a good study out of Brian Wansink, was a research out of Cornell, and he found that people that kept cereal on their counter on average weighed 20 pounds more. And this actually study was in women. So women that kept cereal on their counter weighed 20 pounds more than women that kept it hidden away in a cupboard somewhere. Can you put it in the pantry, in the basement, in the garage? And now there is the danger, though, that by putting it away someplace that you may train yourself to make that association. So maybe put it someplace that is hard to get to, but that maybe you're not likely to, make these connections that you don't want to make. The best thing to do is, of course, to not buy it in the first place. Right. And I know that can be difficult sometimes when you have a family and maybe they're expecting certain things, and, but maybe you ask them, can you make it harder to get? Um, and maybe this maybe isn't really the best title to this slide, but kind of what I wanted to mention here was that, number one is know yourself and know kind of what foods are going to be foods for you, what foods kind of make you feel full and satisfied and happy and not likely to overeat, right? We're all different. An N of one study, N equals the number of people in a study. So kind of an N of one study, if you've ever heard that reference, is a study that you do for yourself. So what works for you? Typically, we are more likely to be hungry and craving things all day if we're eating high glycemic foods. High glycemic foods are foods that are high in carbohydrate that's very easily digestible. So think of things like instant oatmeal and bagels and cookies and cakes and white bread. That's not a sourdough white bread. Sourdough is actually low glycemic, but the regular like Wonder white bread, all these things, hamburger buns, those types of things. Those kinds of things raise our blood sugar levels very quickly and then come crashing down. So making sure that when we are eating, we're getting a high quality fat, lots of protein, foods high in fiber. Grapefruit essential oil can help maybe prevent some of those cravings, and it is a little bit of an appetite suppressant. So if you use any essential oils, that would be a good thing. Having some green tea. Multiple studies link green tea with not only with weight suppression, but also with a little bit with appetite suppression. It's between some of the compounds that are in it and some of the caffeine. Can you try some mindful eating? Having some water, nuts are a great snack. I'm curious if anyone uses apple cider vinegar or has found that it has helped them out. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that apple cider vinegar can help with cravings. So I'm just curious if you want to put in the chat box if you found this to be helpful. Some people take either the capsules, other people, mix um, some apple cider vinegar in with a big glass of water. And I would say if you are going to do it, make sure that if you're mixing it in with water, that number one, it's always best to drink it with a straw because it can be bad for your teeth, the enamel on your teeth. And the other thing is, just being very careful that you're not overdoing it. So, a lot of anecdotal evidence that the apple cider vinegar definitely is very helpful with cravings. Now, anecdotal evidence is one thing, but we do have lots of studies that show apple cider vinegar is actually very good for helping to manage blood sugar levels, um, and can help prevent that rise in high blood sugar levels. So I'm just looking at the comments section here. I'm seeing, I'm seeing for someone grapefruit works well for them. Here we have it's fermented, so it's good for gut health. Absolutely, right? If you're buying the raw apple cider vinegar, is very good for gut health. Here, okay, so I see somebody else does green tea, honey, apple cider vinegar in a big mason jar and sip all morning. So I bet you, yeah, that probably does help very much so with some of that appetite suppressant. So pay attention, what works for you, what doesn't. There's a lot of spices that maybe have been shown to help prevent some of those cravings, as well as things like fenugreek is a spice that is actually very good for blood sugar levels. um, so kind of just paying attention. Okay, so I'm seeing one more: hot water with apple cider vinegar, lemon and honey is actually very nice. Oh, that does sound nice as well. All right, so step number 3 is to make healthy foods the default, right? We want to make the foods that trigger cravings in us and trigger maybe overeating. We want to make those hard to get to. And we want to make healthy foods the default. How do you do that? I saw some mason jar references in the chat box. So maybe you make, put some healthy mason jars in your fridge and you put a salad in them, make a bunch of mason jar salads, chopped vegetables, maybe some cut up fruit. Those clear plastic containers that are going to be sitting, excuse me, those clear glass containers, whether it's a mason jar or just the Pyrex containers. When you see them and right when you open up the fridge or even in your pantry, you see those containers with maybe have some nuts in them or some pumpkin seeds, we're much more likely to eat them. And the things that you don't want to eat, make sure that they're hidden in the opaque containers and at the back of the fridge, or much, much harder to get to. If you have a fridge in your basement, put it in the basement fridge. Maybe you make yourself a little grain bowl for the week and you portion out different lunches for the day so that, all you have to do is open up the fridge and you grab your healthy lunch and it's ready to go. We make much better choices for our future selves than we do for our current selves, right? Our current selves, we just want immediate gratification, right? But if we say, oh, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to eat healthy. Well, by doing something now for yourself tomorrow, you're much more likely to do it. And then it's there and it's ready to go. Number 4 would be to find some healthyish treats. So maybe you do want a snack, you do want a treat, kind of figuring out what works that would make you feel like you're getting a treat, but that maybe would still be healthy. Figuring out, do you like salt? So maybe you have some popcorn or some crackers and hummus. Cook some edamame and put a little bit of salt on that, some pistachios, roasted chickpeas. I've been obsessed lately with some roasted chickpeas. I'm not really all that crazy about the ones that you get in the store in a package. Those to me are really not all that appealing, but if you roast them yourself and put a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper, and you take them out of the oven, in our family, they never make it off of the tray because we kind of grab them all right away and they're really good hot. Do you like sweet? So things like dates or dark chocolate chips and nuts. I make myself a little kind of trail mix and I put dark chocolate chips, some pecans or some sort of nut, and some goji berries. Goji berries are quite delicious, really healthy. And also kind of, they're chewy, so they take a while to eat. Maybe you make some energy bites. I have like no bake energy bites that I just keep in the freezer, and they contain oats, flaxseed, peanut butter, and some dark chocolate chips, and I roll them in coconut. And so all those types of things, maybe if I just grab one of those, it's helpful. Do you like crunchy? So if you really like something that's crunchy, gluten-free crackers tend to be much crunchier than regular crackers, and many times more healthy. Um, Many times, not always. So something like these Mary's Gone crackers, this is a really healthy type of cracker that's very, very crunchy. Or maybe you do a little bit of celery and peanut butter. So kind of figuring out what works for you and maybe having some of these healthiest type of treats on hand. Practice number 5 would be some time restricted eating. And happy to hear in the chat box too, is anyone doing this? This is kind of, a very popular thing right now. Some people call it time restricted eating. It's also can be referred to as intermittent fasting. And basically what this would be is to kind of shortening the eating window of when you're eating. The more time spent eating, the more chances we have for overeating and for some of this kind of binge eating and the stress eating. And so if you know, hey, now's not my window to eat, I can't eat until 11 o'clock, or, oh, it's 7 o'clock and I've made the decision not to eat anymore. Um, that's going to cut down on the amount of times that maybe we are stress eating or overeating. So maybe you try aiming for 8 to 12 hours in your eating window. Most Americans eat in a 16-hour window, right? They eat right before they go to bed, and then sometimes they eat the minute they get up. And so all day, that's 16 hours a day of eating, versus maybe 16 hours a day of fasting. I'm noticing here in the comment section that somebody here, they like to eat their first meal at 12, and the goal is to eat between 12 and 8 p.m. But sometimes, and actually, what I would say to that too is with time restricted eating, the studies seem to indicate that the more you can mix it up a little bit and vary it, the better it is. So you don't even have to do it every day. Maybe you just do it 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And sometimes, if we do it every day, and we're pretty restrictive about it, that it's actually maybe not as good as, kind of keeping our body on its toes, if you want, um, to definitely mix up some of the times a little bit more. So, if you're not doing it every day, that's not a big deal either. Uh, some, number 6 would be to cut back, not necessarily eliminate. Right? So maybe you practice some mindful eating. You have your cookie, but you sit down with it and you put it on a plate and you sit down and, mindfully eat it and mindfully enjoy it. You have some dark chocolate. You have maybe just you portioned out a small portion of chips. But also knowing yourself, that N of 1 study where you really know yourself. Are you an abstainer or a moderator? So, a moderator would be someone who likes to just kind of cut back and to mindfully enjoy some treats here and there. Abstainers say, you know what, it's much easier for me never to have it. I have a girlfriend who was kind of gaining weight. She was realizing that for her, kind of her gateway drug, if you will, was chocolate. And she realized that anytime she had chocolate, it was kind of just this green light to go ahead and eat whatever she wanted. And so she said, I'm not going to cut out desserts, but I'm just going to cut out chocolate. It has been 5 years and she hasn't had chocolate in 5 years. And for her, this is much more liberating, much more freeing than always wonder, should I or shouldn't I have that piece of chocolate? Is it dark? Is it not? And so for many people, it's much easier to just cut something out completely. So this is where knowing yourself is also really important to know yourself. Just going back to the intermittent fasting, I'm seeing here how many hours before bedtime, I'm guessing, are you cutting off the eating? It really depends. Ideally, the earlier the better. So ideally, maybe you're done at 6 o'clock and then you start eating again at 10 a.m. in the morning. But even, if you're eating now until 11 o'clock, it's much easier to say, okay, let me cut it off at 10. And then maybe let me cut it off at 9 and kind of push back that way. So it really kind of depends how late you're eating now. And also cutting back on alcohol. You know, experts are rethinking this kind of either this concept of either you're an alcoholic or you're not, right? And for those people that say, "Oh, I'm not an alcoholic. It's not disrupting my life at all, and I can cut it out anytime I want. It's not a big deal." But maybe you still are drinking maybe 2 or 3 glasses of wine a night, and this, especially for women, can be really, really dangerous. And they're finding that women are getting this non this alcoholic liver disease much earlier. Sometimes even in their 20s or 30s, and that people are actually dying of liver disease because so many more women are using alcohol as a stress management technique. And so, if you feel like, okay, I'm definitely not an alcoholic, but maybe I've identified that maybe I'm drinking a little bit too much, can you cut back? And there's something called moderation management, and it's actually a website. And I think it's the website is moderation.org. It's a nonprofit, and they have different steps that you can do to kind of cut if you're looking to cut back on some of your alcohol, right? Identifying triggers. Is it when you start to make dinner, you always just pour yourself a glass of wine? Is it when you're especially stressed? Is it when you're done with work for the day? Is it when you're maybe sitting down to watch TV? Identifying those triggers and then maybe changing your habits a little bit around the routine around your triggers. Can you maybe make some more mocktails? So when I make dinner, I like to sometimes get a fancy type of sparkling water. I pour it in a wine glass with some ice and some cut up fruit, and that's my mocktail. And I feel like, oh, I'm still having something special, but it's not always just that automatic pouring a glass of wine. And then number 7 would be having compassion for yourself, right? And we're we're living through a pandemic right now, right? I know everyone's tired of hearing this, but we truly are living during unprecedented times. And so, having some compassion for yourself, knowing that it's not only the body, but also the heart that's asking to be fed. And so, how can you give yourself some self care, some love and attention? That's will help you to prevent you from some of those behaviors that you don't want to do. I don't know if anyone has seen Mall Cop. If you're looking for a nice family movie, Mall Cop was one of our favorite ones. That I still love to watch with the kids every once in a while. So in the movie, Paul Blart is the name of the mall cop, and his kids see him putting peanut butter on a piece of pie, and they're like, "Dad, why are you putting peanut butter on pie?" And he says, "Peanut butter, it just fills the cracks of the heart." And so as a dietitian, I'm always like, no, don't use food to fill the cracks of your heart. So my children like to come up to me sometimes and they're like, "Mom, I'm just," they come up with their cookie or whatever they have, and they're like, "I'm filling the cracks of my heart." Like, no, 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 don't do that. But at the same time, part of mindful eating is also occasionally just deciding, hey, you know what? This is what I need now. I need the cookie. I need the chocolate. I need the chips now. And that's all part of mindful eating as well, is but being aware of when we're doing it and why we're doing it. And lastly, too, the type of language that we use can be really important. Going back to that abstainer and moderator type of thing, when we say, "Oh, I can't have that glass of wine, and I can't have that cookie, and I can't have ice cream," right? We feel sorry for ourselves. It's not a very powerful word, right? It makes us feel rebellious. When someone tells you you can't do something, sometimes we want to do it all the more. But when we say I don't, it's more identity based, right? I don't eat after 8 o'clock. It's part of my identity. I don't eat chocolate. I don't pour myself a glass of wine as soon as I'm done with work for the day. Whatever it might be, making it more of an identity based type of thing, and how we frame that refusal can have a huge effect on your behavior. And then lastly, taking care of your heart. How can you take care of your heart in other ways? Exercising, self care, mindfulness, meditation, whatever it might be, making sure that we're taking the time for that, right? Some mindfulness meditation carries over into so many different aspects of our life. Um, the stress management. So you get an app on your phone and try some stress management. All right, so that is the end of our presentation, and thank you so much for joining me here today. And I would love to hear what kind of takeaway that you have that you can put into action. Please feel free as well to ask me any questions. I do have a request that there was a request here to fill out a survey, um, and you can to submit your feedback on today's webinar. I'm posting right now in the chat box. I just posted the survey that everyone can do. That if you want, that would be great. You can fill out the evaluation from today's webinar and give your feedback. Feedback is always welcome and appreciated. So thank you. I'm seeing some people that are putting their takeaways, to be mindful eating, to try some green tea, try some intermittent fasting. So those are all wonderful, great things to try. And I'm glad to hear that you're going to have, put something into action. So many times, when you get a lot of information at one time, it's really hard to do everything. And just kind of to making sure that you don't forget it, maybe writing it down right now on a sticky note, put it in some place that you're going to forget. Oh dear, the link is a baby otter. All right, so sorry about that. Let me try that again. Okay, Command C. And let me send this to everyone. Command V. Okay. No, that's not it either. I'm sorry. I know the baby otter brings you joy. Anyways, so why am I having such a hard time with this? Okay, here. Command C. All right, here we go. Now I have the correct link. So, sorry about that, everyone. There's the correct link. I'm glad it was just, hopefully the baby otters brought you some joy as well. They always bring me joy. And then if you don't mind just, copying and pasting that link and going and filling that out, that would be much appreciated as well. So any questions, comments? I'm just looking to hear, looking to see if there's any other questions or comments that anybody else might have had. But well, thank you all for joining me here today. I'm glad that you enjoyed the session, and hopefully you have some good takeaways, and have a good rest of the week. And thank you all so much for joining me.